Good morning. This is Greg here with the National Weather Service in Grand Forks, and just getting ready to start up this thaw update. The first thing I wanted to point out is that this is our web page. So weather.gov is the first part of that, and if I back up a notch, there's weather.gov/FGF as our home page. And you can see there's a lot of color showing up on there where there are various advisories in effect or of different types that are going on here right now or ending very soon. And I just want to point out as I go over to rivers and lakes, for those of you that may not be familiar, that is where it's going to bring up the river gauges that are within the Red River Basin and surrounding areas, as you can see. And for instance, the Devil's Lake points that are showing purple, those have been in major flooding for now quite a number of years and sitting up there frozen in at this point. So that's an ongoing flood issue. And then you see further down by Aberdeen and points south of there along the James River that, let me just close this. As I pull that up at Aberdeen near there, you'll see that there is the James River near Columbia, and it's showing the blue line showing the river rising, and it's rising into that red area, which is the area that's in the moderate flood stage. The purple area above there would be major flood stage, and you can see then the dots connected on that line, oops, back there, and that is the forecast for the next 7 days. So again, just to reacquaint those that might not be familiar with these attributes of the web page. So the blue solid line is the what has occurred for the last couple of days, and then the line after that with the dots are the 6-hour increments of the forecast for that river point for the next 7 days. So generally within the modeling world, the River Forecast Center has the ability to look farther than 7 days down the road with the model, and typically if they see anything significant that is starting to happen within there, they'll let us know and we'll try and reflect that into a forecast. Right now, within the Red River Basin, we don't have much in the way of significant thaw activity yet. So for instance, as I go down, and I'm down in Traverse County showing 5 Mile Creek there above Herman, just coming out of Grant County area, and you can see how that creek has risen up just below action stage. This area, that area of northeast South Dakota, far southeastern North Dakota, that whole area into west central Minnesota has spent the better part of the last 2 days above freezing. So what that does is, of course, the nighttime temperature staying above freezing means that snow, whatever is remaining, is ripening very quickly and starting to run off into the ditches. Anything that has frozen over in those ditches is starting to open up and move. So you have water that is, again, moving into the ditch network, into the streams. And so 5 Mile Creek was seeing some rises and then leveled off. Further down into the 12 Mile Creek and area, there's some action up and down, which is indicating some ice activity and something with the gauge there that the USGS will probably be out there monitoring. Here in the 12 Mile Creek above Wheaton, where it starts to come in then into the Mustinka, you'll see some steady rises that are occurring. So that's flow that is coming in and then heading into Lake Traverse itself. Further down, here's the Rabbit River near Campbell, and you can see that's starting to rise from the local ditches that are pouring in toward there. And so there is some motion in the water that is starting to rise and move on the Rabbit River, and then that will come into the Bois de Sioux. Right now, the Bois de Sioux, the large amount of rise that we're seeing there is some of that inflow that's coming in locally, as well as the releases that are coming out of Lake Traverse. And so the expectation, I'll pick on one more here. Here's the Otter Tail coming in right below or near Orwell Dam. That is showing a decrease because they've been releasing from there to try and draw down the reservoir there, but now they're ramping or cutting back that a little bit as thaw starts to come in. Further down, there's the Otter Tail at Breckenridge, right at the diversion, and so you're seeing that nearly steady, but now starting to show a little bit of rise as water that has been released earlier out of Orwell Reservoir, and also some of the local inflow will start to move in there. But coming into Wahpeton in general, you're seeing the rise coming up. And so that is approaching action stage now for Wahpeton. And the River Forecast Center is looking at this morning, whether or not they might issue a forecast for that at this point. It's quite possible. But their expectation with this thaw and with the temperatures that we hit above freezing, well, right now, Fergus Falls, when I just last checked, Fergus Falls, Detroit Lakes, Elbow Lake in Minnesota were still above freezing, but already Wahpeton, Sisseton, and areas across the Dakotas are dropping below freezing. And that's as this most recent winter storm that is just coming through the area or exiting the area is coming through. All those temperatures are going to start dropping below freezing. So that's going to shut down the thaw process and start locking that water back up to a degree. But that flow that you see coming into Wahpeton, the flow that's in those larger rivers now, that is going to continue to move to a degree. Okay, so that's water that's going to move in. Action stage likely to reach and exceed at Wahpeton, and then the expectation is that it'll stay right in that area between action and minor flood stage for the better part of the next week, as it just kind of steadily moves water down the system. Now on the North Dakota side, a little bit of that rise has also been occurring, not showing up as much on the upstream end of the wild rice, but as we get later in toward Abercrombie, you're seeing some of that local inflow from Richland County that is moving its way into the wild rice. There's Antelope Creek at Dwight also showing the rises, and that of course is then flowing in and up into the system. So it's expected that the wild rice will also approach action stage in the next couple of days and could move into that range between action and minor flood stage. And then as we move up into Hickson and toward Fargo, you'll notice that Fargo is very close to action stage, about, well, it's 6,800, excuse me, below the action stage, so it's possible that it'll get up into that action stage over the next few days as well. But again, that's just from this initial thaw, that's from that initial process. That's a good thing. Just like, as those of you that are familiar with the COVID-19 charts that have been out there, this low and steady and slow rise is allowing water to move in and through this system and get a fair volume of water moving down the river and out of the area, as opposed to a rapid and sharp rise, which would cause those higher stages to come in here. So right now, all of this is going along very well to bring water out of the South Basin and start moving it down the river. At this point, we do not see that same type of thaw process occurring elsewhere in the basin. So in the areas that are in the Fargo area and points north, you're not getting significant runoff into those areas, into those river systems yet. And of course, the cooler temperatures will shut that down. Okay, so that's just looking at what is going on here in the overall thaw process. I'm going to go back now again to, let's see if I can bring this up. Here is just the precipitation that has occurred here in the last week. So that includes what's occurred through this morning that we managed to measure. And that graphic is showing, again, a large area of from 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, maybe a few areas that might have tipped just above 1/2 an inch, extending back from Minot into and across the Grand Forks area. So mainly more along the northern part of the Red River Basin here. And you can see that during that time period, and this is the last 7 days, by the way, so 4,600 hundredths in Grand Forks total, about 2,300 hundredths during that same period in Fargo. And early in that period was the 15-20 hundredths that came through and across the far southern basin here late last week and over the weekend. So again, not huge amounts of precipitation, similar to what we were forecasting and what was in the discussion here at the end of last week. So now we are seeing that has come into effect. So here's the southern part of the Red River Basin, and this is a nice graphic showing the next 7 days. So here's the temperature regime, and this is for roughly the White Rock Dam area right on the North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota border. And you can see that in that area we're going to now be steadily dropping well below freezing for the next few days. And then early next week we start creeping above freezing. And then we've got a running couple of days where in that southern basin, so this is roughly the area south of Wahpeton Breckenridge and into the southern, extreme southern part of the basin, where we could see temperatures again above freezing for 1, 2, possibly 3 days. And again, that's going to open up remaining snowpack. That's going to open up rivers and streams. That's going to get more water moving into the system. During that same time period, there's the probability of precipitation. So not high during there, and you'll notice that we only have the tailing end of precipitation that occurred early this morning, and then they forecast for a few hundredths of an inch that can occur late Wednesday into Thursday of next week. So not a lot of precipitation expected during this time frame, and warming temperatures, which should again get water moving down that system and getting more and more water starting to move toward the Fargo-Moorhead area from the southern basin. At this time, again, we do not have large amounts of snowmelt occurring in the Cheyenne River Basin or in the Buffalo, on the Minnesota side, the south and north branches of the Buffalo River, but there will start to see some of that moving. Let's see where I can get the next of these images. So bear with me, I've got a few of these thrown in here. So here's Fargo's version of that same image. So in the areas near Fargo-Moorhead, the same thing, cooling down and quite cool temperatures here this early part of the weekend. And then next week, again, kicking above freezing, below freezing, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but then that near area. So now we're seeing a larger part of the South Basin up through the Fargo area that could see a day or two of temperatures staying at or above freezing. So again, you'll start to see more in the Buffalo River on the Minnesota side. You'll start seeing more action in the lower and middle Cheyenne, probably the upper Cheyenne River Basin as well, some into the Maple and those rivers that are coming in near the Fargo-Moorhead area. Again, not a lot of precipitation, so we've got a few hundredths of an inch, maybe a couple of tenths of an inch that could come in that late Wednesday into Thursday time frame. So that's going to be the next area that's going to start moving water and starting to move it into the larger streams and eventually toward the Red River. And if I can back up, whoops, finding back, there we go, there's Grand Forks. And if you notice Grand Forks area, so we're talking really Halstead and points north, not going to get too much above freezing, but again, there's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Well, there's the Tuesday, Wednesday time frame above freezing, but the nighttime temperature is still dropping below freezing. And so that's going to prevent anything in the central and northern parts of the Red River Basin from really ripening or moving much at that point. So most of the activity next week is going to involve some thawing, some melting, and a continued movement toward the larger streams and into the Red River through the southern part of the basin. And this graphic, we just had the briefing this morning also for the national spring flood outlook, and there's important that focuses again up on our area here, the Red River Basin, the James River Valley, and then some select points along the Mississippi that have the highest flood risks going into this spring. Okay, so back into the outlook. As we look at the temperature regime here at the 8 to 14 day, again, we start looking from the middle or late part of next week and into that second week period, temperatures near normal. So we are going to start seeing more and more temperatures steadily above freezing during the day. Still should be dropping below freezing at night primarily during that second week period, but we are going to be putting pressure on for a climatological warm-up. And then precipitation, we're moving from a somewhat wetter regime here, still showing up in the 6 to 10 day, and then into a closer to normal period into that second week. And so that's the period that would be right at the end of the last week in March, if you will. The other thing that's been updated here, so overall this is the outlook looking into April, and I'll just click on that to show that the temperature probability still showing not any clear signal of how April is going to be temperature-wise. So we're kind of below or between the below and the above normal, so in the indeterminate realm. And as far as precipitation, likewise, no strong signals for significant precipitation up here. You'll notice that above normal precipitation signal showing up across southern South Dakota, southern Minnesota. And then into the 3-month, this would be the April, May, and June time frame. Again, the not clear signal for temperatures across much of the Dakotas. Minnesota, however, having a slight lean toward the warmer than normal leading into spring, full spring. And then from a precipitation standpoint, yep, above normal precipitation still showing up as a possibility throughout that April, May, and June time frame. Back to this official spring outlook. So this is on our, we'll be putting a link on our webpage, weather.gov/FGF, to this outlook that just came out this morning, and that's just the whole national outlook that shows there's the map for the rest of the country, and there's a little descriptive video here, video clip that does talk about that temperature and precipitation outlook. So you can take a look at that and read through that. We'll also put a link to, I'll create some of these in a more slide format and put a link on that. And then we will be sending out through email just a short situation update text product. I should also indicate that really from a standpoint of what our long-range flood risk is, that's still out there and has not changed at all in the recent times. So this is again what the 50% point showing the moderate and major flood risk throughout the area. So when you look at the probabilities that were released last week, those probabilities aren't changing through this process. We got very near normal precipitation here this past week. We could see near normal precipitation here in the week or two to come, and those kind of drive us down that mid-range of the probabilities that have already been released. So stay tuned. If we would get substantially more precipitation than that, that could put the higher risk categories in play. But for now, things are behaving well. This is a good, even melt process.